Tonight on Reporting Scotland, the BBC announces a new dedicated TV channel for Scotland. But what does the audience want?
Drama and comedy. Well, I look forward to seeing more of that.
As long as it introduces more work for people of Scotland, that's the most important thing.
So it's going to be Mrs McDougall's missing cat, or somebody stole my bike.
Also on the programme, the Met Office upgrades warnings for snow affecting the morning rush hour.
Here at the National Traffic Control Centre, they say Storm Doris could bring down power lines, damage buildings and bring traffic disruption throughout the night and tomorrow.
Claims that the voluntary sector is in survival mode. Almost half of Scottish charities saw reduced turnover last year. The scheme to protect the elusive wildcat by catching and neutering feral cats in the Highlands. And...
Hello.
Hello again. The Hogmanay favourite is making a comeback, a tribute to an irreverent reverend. Good evening. The BBC has announced plans to launch a dedicated TV channel for Scotland. £30 million a year will be invested in the project, with the service expected to start in autumn 2018. It includes a news hour at 9 o'clock after the BBC rejected the idea of a so-called Scottish Six. Well, Stephen Godden is not so very far away. He's in the Reporting Scotland control room for us tonight. Stephen.
That's right, Jackie. Today has been a day where the BBC has turned the camera on itself. As part of the renegotiation of its Royal Charter, the Director General, Tony Hall, promised to do more to address the concerns that some people have about the way the BBC represents Scotland. He came here today to set out the detail. And I think it's fair to say both inside and outside this building, he caught plenty of people off guard. The element of surprise, an important ingredient for any storyteller, and it seems the Director General of the BBC. Tony Hall arrived in Glasgow promising to do more to reflect life in the devolved nations. For Scotland, he revealed, that means a new dedicated TV channel.
The right way to give viewers in Scotland choice is to mirror what we do in radio. I mean, in the morning I listen to the Today programme or Good Morning Scotland, and I believe that's what we're now offering in television as well. And I'm excited by that, because I actually think this is an immensely creative country, an immensely creative place.
So what about the view on the streets?
I'm Scottish, but I'm British. No, I don't watch Scottish television.
Drama and comedy. Well, I look forward to seeing more of that.
As long as it introduces more work for people of Scotland, that's the most important thing.
So it's going to be Mrs McDougall's missing cat, or somebody stole my bike.
News coverage, a constant source of tension, is central to the change. It sees the return of a traditional time slot.
The 9 o'clock news from the BBC.
But with a twist. A Scottish 9, covering stories from around the globe, but no Scottish 6. For some, that's a missed opportunity.
If you tune in at 6 o'clock to a typical network news programme, you will see that they'll quite often lead on an English health story, and then there'll be an English transport story and perhaps an English education story. That's all great for the people of England, but it's not good enough for the people of Scotland.
Another thorny issue for those in charge here is the licence fee. Compared to the other devolved nations, a smaller percentage of the money raised in Scotland is spent in Scotland. Which brings us back to Shetland, commissioned here for a BBC network audience. An extra £20 million a year is being invested to do more of that. So could Scotland, for example, recreate a Welsh success story?
What we do want to do is attract some of our Scottish talent back here as well. So the likes of Stephen Moffat, a great Scottish writer, maybe he'll think about doing something for us at some point in the future with this additional spend.
The Scottish Government welcomed today's announcement, but questioned the budget for the proposed new channel.
We estimated it would cost £75 million to deliver, so the £30 million announced today, however welcome, may actually fall short of what's required. So yes, we welcome a new Scottish television channel, but it cannot and must not be run on a shoestring.
MSPs will have the chance to quiz Tony Hall tomorrow when he faces a Holyrood committee. The aim is to have Scotland's new channel up and running in 18 months' time. Stephen Godden reporting Scotland, Glasgow.
Well, our political editor Brian Taylor joins us now from Holyrood. Brian, broadcasting and the Scottish Six have been the source of much political debate. Do the announcements today go any way to addressing those concerns?
I think the response here at Holyrood, the response generally from the body politic has been notably warm. I mean, it can be remarkably disarming to say yes. Remember that the idea of a distinctive Scottish channel was piloted by a commission set up by the first SNP government 10 years ago. That idea of a distinctive Scottish channel was demanded as recently as 2015 by the First Minister. So the BBC is saying twice yes, eventually, and I think that is having a really good response here at Holyrood. Now, there are important, significant caveats in that response. You heard from Fiona Hislop there about the money, and that point will undoubtedly be pursued by the Scottish Government and by others, but across the parties, the response is definitely positive. I think it was quite significant that the formal statements put out by the Scottish Government and the SNP, as opposed to earlier tweets, the formal statements made no mention of the Scottish Six. They were talking in welcoming terms with those caveats about the proposals advanced by the BBC. It seems that today, perhaps for once, the BBC has said yes, and Holyrood is smiling benignly upon the BBC today. No doubt normal service will be resumed soon.
Brian, thank you. Weather warnings have been upgraded ahead of the arrival of Storm Doris, with large areas of Scotland due to be affected by snow overnight and into tomorrow morning's rush hour. Travel disruption is expected, and already Borders Council has cancelled all school transport for tomorrow morning, with school closures also possible. Maura Kinnerborough has been to see the preparations being made by Traffic Scotland.
They're charting the weather patterns here at the Traffic Scotland National Control Centre. Storm Doris is due to hit Scotland about 2 o'clock tomorrow morning and last all day through the day tomorrow, bringing very bad weather to parts of southern and central Scotland. With me is Dean Connolly. How bad is it going to be?
You can see from the screens behind me, we've got the picture on there from the Met Office indicating the weather forecast for tomorrow. Most of the country is covered in a yellow warning of wind, snow and rain, and plus we've got the amber warning which is covering east central and southern central Scotland, and that's for snow, and this snow could be anything up to 30 centimetres in the hills. So we expect severe weather in challenging conditions over tomorrow.
How do you think that will affect us? Will it be damage to power lines, to buildings, traffic disruption?
It could be all of that, but within the Traffic Scotland Control Centre here, we'll have the multi-agency response team in here, all the operating companies working together to ensure if anything does happen, it'll be cleared up as quickly as it possibly can for the traffic coming on tomorrow morning.
What's your advice for the public then?
Our advice is always the same. Check out the Traffic Scotland website, plan your journey, drive to the conditions, give that bit extra time and that bit extra space so the car in front of you. It can take 10 times longer to stop in snow than it can in a normal dry day. Be careful, make sure you reach your destination safe.
Dean Connolly, thanks very much. Time to make a plan B for tomorrow then if you are affected, and you can keep up to date overnight through the night on the BBC Scotland website.
Maura Kinnerborough there. More councils have been setting their council tax for the coming year. Aberdeen has just become the 5th council to voluntarily decide not to put up the basic rate, even though this means they're adding to the pressure on their finances. In all but 3 council areas, the council tax should be agreed by tomorrow. People who live in the higher property bands face automatic increases regardless of what their council decides. An independent watchdog has said Police Scotland has made substantial improvements in its use of stop and search. The Inspector of Constabulary says the controversial use of so-called consensual searches has almost ceased. There's been a 67% reduction in the practice, with almost all carried out on a statutory or legal basis. A scholarship has been set up in honour of the motor neurone disease campaigner Gordon Aikman, who died earlier this month. The 31-year-old's legacy was debated at Holyrood today. The Scottish Government announced it would fund a £25,000 scholarship to enable health workers or those affected by MND to research better ways of caring for people with the condition. Almost half of Scottish charities saw reduced turnover last year. A report from the Scottish Council for Voluntary Organisations also reveals that charities are expecting demand for their services to increase. Our social affairs correspondent Riva Alderson reports.
A facelift for a daycare centre for dementia sufferers and their families. The charity which runs it in Stranraer couldn't afford contractors to do the work outside, so it called in volunteers, all ex-offenders. Dementia sufferers benefit, they learn important life skills.
A lot of people, if they've been through the criminal justice system and after they come out the other side, they kind of find a void and they find it hard to find employment or training opportunities and stuff, so that's where we come in and we can offer that to them.
And is that your own experience as well?
Yes, that's my own experience as well, yes.
The charity which operates this project says by offering ex-offenders work, it takes the risk from potential employers by giving the men experience. But it's now learned it won't be funded in the forthcoming year. It's a familiar story for charities, who a report says have gone into survival mode. Almost half saw income falling last year. Those who did record increases were mainly large organisations with turnover of more than £500,000. 72% of charities forecast there'd be increased demand for their services this year, but nearly 3/4 said they were unable adequately to plan because funding was invariably made on a short-term basis, typically a single year. Apex says this hand-to-mouth existence is ultimately wasteful.
A good third of the work, certainly of the management level, is spent looking out for funding, working through the various reporting mechanisms that we've got to go through just to make these contracts happen. It's a real problem because what we'd like to be doing, obviously, is spending time on working out how to do these contracts better.
The Scottish Council for Voluntary Organisations, which produced the report, is lobbying ministers to change the way charities receive funding.
It's short-sighted, it's costing the whole sector, it's costing funders, whether they be local or national government, lots of time and effort. So we really need to rethink this, move on to a 3-year cycle of funding a model that actually makes it better for charities, particularly small and medium-sized ones, to become more sustainable.
The Scottish Government says it wants to develop a 3-year funding cycle to support a strong and dynamic third sector. Revel Alderson reporting, Scotland, Stranraer.
It's 19 minutes to 7. A reminder now of tonight's top story. The BBC announces plans to launch a dedicated TV channel for Scotland. And still to come, more than just a Scottish Cup tie. Hearts take on their oldest rivals Hibs for a place in the quarter-finals. Around 80 feral cats have been neutered in Scotland as part of a massive project to prevent them breeding with wildcats. Our environment correspondent Kevin Keane reports from Morven on the west coast.
In a secret location, camera traps are checked to see if they've captured footage of one of our most elusive neighbours. The Scottish wildcat populations have been plummeting in recent decades, and this team is trying to protect that handful that remain.
What we hoped to find was evidence that we still had some wildcats remaining on Morven. And fortunately we have found some wildcats clinging on, still on Morven Peninsula, which is fantastic news.
Feral cats have been getting captured from all across this part of Scotland. This one in particular has been high on the target list.
Judging by the markings patterns and the overall physique of the cat, it's definitely a cat of domestic origin. It's got what we call a marble tabby pattern. But the scary thing is it's living right next to a really good wildcat, so it was a really important one to get caught and neutered.
There's no vet on Morven, and so this pop-up clinic has been set up in a resident's summer house. Here they're checked for disease before being neutered and then released. It's a non-lethal way of controlling breeding.
We know that domestic cats, feral and pet domestic cats, are now the major threat to wildcats because of hybridisation and disease control. So without reducing the population of entire feral cats, we'll be unable to secure a future for Scottish wildcat.
The landscape at Morven is ideal territory for wildcats. There's plenty of cover for them, but with no rabbits in this area, finding food is a challenge. As a measure of how few of these animals exist here, this entire peninsula at Morven is 140 square kilometres. On here, 150 camera traps are set up, and between them, they've managed to capture images of just 3 wildcats. With these cats sorted, the traps are relayed in the hope of catching more. Few of us may have seen these animals in the flesh, but they remain an iconic Scottish species whose continued existence is far from guaranteed. Kevin Keane reporting, Scotland, Morven.
Police have arrested an inmate who'd failed to return to the Castle Huntly Open Prison near Dundee. James Boyle was arrested in the Glasgow area after being missing for 2 weeks. He'll appear in court later. A train's been damaged after it hit a fallen tree in Aberdeenshire. The incident happened close to Inverurie at around 11 o'clock. The train operator, ScotRail, says no one was injured, but there was damage to the front of the vehicle. Passengers on the Aberdeen to Inverness line had to use replacement buses between Inverurie and Dice. The soft drinks company Coca-Cola says it supports calls for the Scottish Government to introduce a deposit return scheme in an effort to reduce litter and increase recycling. Deposit return schemes involve customers paying a small sum which is paid back when they return a bottle or can. SNP MSP Richard Lochhead, who has pushed for Scotland to introduce the scheme, said the move was a big turnaround and a boost for the campaign. Well, a full house is expected at Easter Road this evening, where Hibs play Hearts, a Scottish Cup replay. The sides are playing for a place in the quarter-final after the first match ended goalless. But like all Edinburgh derbies, this is more than just a cup tie. Our senior football reporter Chris McLaughlin is there. Chris.
Yes, Jackie, a bitterly cold night here in the capital, but trust me, in around an hour's time it will be absolutely red hot in terms of atmosphere inside this ground. As you say, a sellout expected 10 days ago, a pretty drab 0-0 draw at Tynecastle, so they're having to do it all over again. It was exactly the same last year at this stage of the competition. 0-0 down Gorgie Way and then back here to Easter Road, and a goal from Jason Cummings gave Hibs a 1-0 win to send them through to the quarter-finals and eventually on to win the competition for the first time in 114 years. The big question is, can they do it again? Can they beat their rivals here at home?
The game will take care of itself, right? I never predict a derby because obviously we've not got a very good record, but the latest, we have had a good record lately, but no in the past, so I think we'll win. I think 2-1 Hibs probably.
I think Hibs will do it tonight, play well, no reason why we can't do it. Same again as last season. Here we go, 2 in a row.
After the result of Tynecastle, easy. It was like we should have deserved to win, but pitch was bad and stuff. So.
But is Dad confident?
Very confident. Very confident tonight. Definitely.
Why?
Jason Cummings hat-trick. Definitely. Bring it on.
So the Hibs fans, as you can see, they are pretty confident. What about Hearts? Well, here to discuss their chances with me is the Radio Scotland pundit and former Hearts player Alan Preston. Alan, Hibs say that Hearts are the favourite, are they?
No, the bookies tell you differently. Hibs are the favourites according to the bookmakers. They're very, really long, Chris. So I think Hibs' home advantage. They've got a decent result away at Tynecastle, so they'll fancy their chances tonight.
Now, as I said earlier, not a great spectacle 10 days ago. It can't be any worse here tonight, can it?
No, it can't. We've got grass on the pitch. You know, it was really poor at Tynecastle. Very little chances created by either side, and I think a draw was a fair result. You know, 0-0 was probably about right. So we'll go again tonight, and this could go the whole way to penalties.
I've heard some people saying this game might mean more to one side or the other. Do you buy that? Does it mean more to Hibs or Hearts in particular?
No, it means so much to both of them. Hibs want to keep the trophy and Hearts want to try and take it off them tonight. If they can knock them out, they would be absolutely delighted. So you can't split them. It means so much to both the clubs.
Alan, thank you very much indeed for joining us this evening. Alan is off to join our BBC Radio Scotland colleagues. They have the game live this evening. Sports Sound is on air at the moment. Kick-off this evening is 7:45.
Thank you, Chris. Ricky Fulton's comic creation, The Reverend I Am Jolly, is making a comeback on the stage. Actors Johnny Mack and Liam Dolan have been touring with a tribute show to Francie and Josie. The double act Ricky Fulton performed with Jack Mulroy. Well, now they're adding Scotland's dearest minister. Aileen Clark reports.
Hello. My name is Jolly, spelt M-O-R-B-I-D.
Ricky Fulton, the master of comic timing, is a hard act to follow, but his performance has been closely studied to reproduce the most morose of ministers.
Hello. What kind of day have you had? Has it been negative? Downtrodden?
Are you dancing? You asking? I'm asking. I'm dancing.
Johnny Mack and Liam Dolan have been touring a Francie and Josie tribute show. Adding Hogmanay's favourite minister is a further tribute to the comic legend.
You know, it's very easy to stand up and say the lines, but to portray him doing that character is really what I'm trying to get across, and keep that memory of Ricky Fulton alive, so that when people come and watch it, they say, oh yeah, he did used to do that.
Well, that's another year gone.
The permission to perform these sketches, though, came from an unusual quarter.
We found out that the SSPCA were left the rights to the Reverend I Am Jolly sketches by Ricky Fulton, and that was the first time we'd found that out, and we had to discover it, but we had to approach them to get the rights to perform it.
And what was their reaction?
They loved it. From the word go, from the first email contact, they were over the moon. They were delighted that it was being portrayed again. They were delighted that it had been picked up, and that, of course, it was going to benefit the SSPCA.
There's still some vintage Francie and Josie in the new show too, though.
I mean, you were never very clever at the school.
Oh, don't mention the school. What do you have to mention the school for? I didn't like the school. I hated the school. It was the worst 4 days of my life.
Well, after the Reverend I Am Jolly and obviously Francie and Josie, might it be time for the return of Super Cop next?
So just keep your mouth shut.
Now listen,
No,
you
you listen, pal. This is the police you're dealing with. This is the police. It doesn't say kiss me quick up there.
Aileen Clark, reporting Scotland.
Well, as we've been hearing, Storm Doris is expected to cause travel disruption tomorrow morning. It's already pretty windy in the Northern Isles, as these dramatic pictures show. To give you some idea of the scale, the cliffs you can see are up to 400 feet high. Well, that's Christopher's cue to tell us what's in store.
Yes, and our attention turns from wind to snow, Jackie. Thank you very much indeed. Hello there. It was a pretty pleasant afternoon for many of us. Some blue skies in the end, some lovely pictures coming in from our weather watchers. But as we head through the next few hours, our attention turns to something altogether more wintry. Rain pushing in at first across the southwest, quite heavy for a time through parts of Dumfries and Galloway, perhaps some localised flooding. It's all connected to a deep area of low pressure, which is Storm Doris, and that's going to work its way across the country overnight. And as that rain meets cold air, increasingly falling as snow, so we have an amber be prepared warning in force for the risk of snow from 2 a.m. across the borders, through parts of Lanarkshire, in towards the Lothians and the Central Belt generally. And we also have a lower yellow be aware warning for areas around that, stretching as far north as the Central Highlands. So tomorrow morning for central and southern Scotland, likely to see some significant disruption with a combination of the rain and the snow. Right down at sea level, centimetre or two, but given any elevation, well, we could well see tens of centimetres of snow. High parts of the roads we've got highlighted here could well see some disruption, and it will be a really wintry morning for many. Quite windy too, coming in from the east. Further north, up towards parts of northern Aberdeenshire and towards Murray, drier, but still some rain, some winteriness over the hills, similar to for the far north. For parts of the Hebrides, some showery rain here, but the Northern Isles probably sitting pretty. As we head through the course of the morning, that system slowly pulling away, but it will take a while, and the disruption could last right throughout the course of tomorrow. Temperature-wise, well, 5-6 Celsius at best, but where we have any snow on the ground in the southeast, it really will be quite cold. Then, as we head through the rest of the afternoon into the evening, weather fronts in the west, showery outbreaks of rain, quite windy around the west coast as well, and that then edges in as we head overnight Thursday to Friday. Again, wintry over the hills and the high ground. There it goes, moving away as we head through towards Friday morning, replacing it a ridge of high pressure, and that means Friday actually much better. Drier, brighter, some sunshine, but as we head through towards the afternoon, there will be some further outbreaks of rain arriving from the Atlantic. Temperatures there back to where they should be, 6, 7, maybe 8 Celsius. So to recap, the warning areas for tomorrow morning, it's the amber area you see on the chart there. We were likely to see the significant disruption from that snow. Some difficult driving conditions, not only on the higher road routes, but at times to lower levels too. That's the forecast for now.
Thank you very much, Christopher. And now a reminder of tonight's main news. The BBC has announced plans to launch a dedicated TV channel for Scotland. £30 million a year will be invested in the project, with the service expected to start in autumn 2018. It will include a news hour at 9 o'clock, after the BBC rejected the idea of a so-called Scottish Six. The fiancé of the children's author Helen Bailey has been found guilty of murdering her and dumping her body in a cesspit under their garage in Hertfordshire. Ian Stewart drugged his partner over several weeks before smothering her in the hope of claiming a multi-million-pound inheritance. And that's Reporting Scotland. Our next main bulletin is just after the 10 o'clock news. Until then, from all the team, good evening.